Hi, everybody, and welcome to our third in the series of the United Way Equity Challenge. The past 2 weeks, we have had Liz De La Luz from the Greater Ottawa County United Way and Robyn Afrik from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office of Ottawa County. Today, we are really pleased to have two special guests, and I'll bring them on shortly. So, Robyn and Liz, any words you'd like to say before we get on to the main part of the conversation?
Not really. I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate, Gloria, you allowing us to take over 3 weeks to be able to, have these conversations. And I really appreciate working with you and Robyn on making this happen.
Yeah, ditto. I appreciate it as well. It's great. It's good learning and good partnerships.
Great, thank you. And it shows that, that we can actually do some really great work together, especially when we listen and talk with each other. And we've also had, quite a few laughs along the way as we do this. So now, if you'll bear with me, I am going to bring on Al Vanderberg, the Ottawa County Administrator. Hi,
Good afternoon, Gloria.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
And I'm also bringing on Patrick Moran, the President of the Ottawa County United Way.
Good afternoon.
So thank you for joining us today, gentlemen. If I may be so crass, we decided, Robyn and Liz and I thought that it would be really great to get the perspective of a privileged white gentleman, as these two gentlemen are, but they're very committed to this effort. And they've been doing the 21-day challenge all along, but they also have had a very long commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, Al, can you tell us just a little bit about your role as the Ottawa County Administrator?
Sure. I'm appointed by an 11-member elected County Board of Commissioners, and my role is to be the Chief Administrative Officer. I'm called the County Administrator for Ottawa County. So in that role, I have operational authority over half the county departments. We have about 36. And then through the Board of Commissioners assignment, the money for the county as well. And so I end up in a role where I try to get everybody on the same page in areas that are important. We embarked on the 4 Cs initiative, so 4 areas in 2012 that we determined were very important for the future of the county to get all 36 pieces of the county on the same page. Were customer service, communication, creativity, things like innovation and lean, and also cultural intelligence. So more formally as a county, I guess, we began this journey in about 2012.
Great. Thank you, Al. And Patrick, can you tell us a little bit more about your role as president of the Greater Ottawa County United Way?
Sure. I just enjoyed my 14th anniversary of being at United Way, and sometimes I think it went by in a flash, and other times I can't believe it's only been 14 years. But as the president, I get to, with my board of directors, guide the scope and direction of the impact agenda for United Way in Ottawa County. And the impact agenda is really a data-driven research model that says what's actually going on in our community, what's going right, what's going wrong, and how do we invest finances, how do we invest volunteers, and how do we invest advocacy into making that impact model better, into strengthening our community. And the DEI realm of that has always been a part of the work we do, but it's always kind of been below the surface. It's inside of some of the other things we do. And as you all know, it's time it wasn't below the surface. It's time it was front and center for us at United Way. And the 21-day equity challenge and some other changes we've made inside our organization were really our opportunity to step up and say, it's not just a part of what we do, it's central to what we do.
Great. Thank you both. So, and Liz and Robyn, anytime you have a question, please feel free to drop in. So now I'm going to go into our our actual discussion or question. Al, what's very interesting to me and probably to a lot of the community and our viewers is that Ottawa County is seen as being a very homogeneous, very white county. Yet you have put in place and got the supervisors to be at a diversity, equity, and inclusion office. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey in doing that?
Sure. And I'll just say I grew up in North Ottawa, Grand Haven Township, went off to college at U of M, and really didn't understand how the world kind of looked at our area until I met people different than me at some of these places who described our area in a different lens. Subsequently, entering into a public management career, I was city manager down in South Haven, which has a significant African-American population, and had a lot of interaction with that community there. In fact, ended up starting a cultural relations commission because we had some strife between the races in South Haven, and we did some televised forums on race, and I learned a lot through that interaction. And then I spent about 17 years as adjunct faculty at GRCC, and I allowed my students to get out of a section of one of the tests on civil rights that they didn't like this section of the test regardless of the topic we were on. And I allowed them to interview somebody who had been discriminated against and write a paper on that, and then they could skip that section of the test. And I think we all learned a lot about discrimination in West Michigan from that exercise. And then I've observed things just working in organizations. But then 17 years ago, I did come back to work in Ottawa County. I became involved with LEDA almost immediately on the CEO Advisory Council, and I became just amazed and surprised at the passion that the leaders of our largest corporations had for DEI, and also the warnings that I heard that if our county and if our region, if West Michigan did not become more welcoming to those who are different than the cultural norm, that that we may be overlooked for future business sightings, and there may be pieces of corporations that move elsewhere. And there were leaders that spoke very explicitly. I didn't have to guess what they were thinking. And as we talked about, you know, Ottawa County, the county organization is very representative of Ottawa County. We need to get, we need to be very welcoming as an organization. We need to lead with other organizations in the county. And so we began this venture in a very strong partnership with LEDA, where we trained up 700 employees. LEDA put together a great program for us and has helped us a lot along the way. And today, you know, we got to a point where we just could not keep the pace of what we needed to do, trying to have people on staff do it when we all had other jobs, and we needed an expert. And so, you know, we did, our rallying cry was future economic prosperity. We are a very conservative, predominantly white community. And as I've had conversations in many different forums over time, I know how quickly people can shut down if you begin from a position of blame, shame, and guilt. And so to me, the future economics are staggering. And if anybody wants to dial into the WEF Foundation, they do a study that they recently updated that tells a very stark story of the economic growth that diverse communities, diverse businesses represent. And if you miss out on that, what that could mean for your future. So I think that, you know, we were able to, the Board of Commissioners has been very supportive through this entire thing. They processed, we hired Robyn Afrik. Robyn did very similar work for Meyer Corporation and was a great fit for us because, again, with 36 different pieces, with differing authority structures and different mandates, you know, a portion of what the county does is mandated by state law. A portion is discretionary, what the county board decides they want to do, as opposed to what we have to do. And so, you know, Robyn is used to working in that environment where there's a lot of moving pieces and some moving in different directions, and the need to kind of corral all that and move it in the same direction. And so she was a great choice for us. We're able to also bring on a support person for her. We're able to fund the first 5 years of the effort with support of the nonprofit and private sector community, which again is important to us to show that this is an all hands on deck issue, because the equity issues are very real, and future prosperity is not the only reason you would do something like this, but it's the one I think that speaks to so many people, because regardless of your position on anything, I don't know if there's anybody in Ottawa County that would say, I don't want jobs for my kids or grandkids in the future. And so to me, it's at least a call to arms that gets people's attention and lets them know, beyond what you think about certain things, we are going to be left in the dust. And for one, I love Ottawa County. My ancestors came here in 1859, and I would love to see Ottawa County a place in the future, whereas the board, our vision statement now is where you belong, and it's been that way for several years. I really want Ottawa County to be a place where everybody feels they belong. And if we truly get there, I think that not just the sense of belonging means that everybody is comfortable, they feel welcomed, but then also that we will be able to tap a wide diversity of peoples in making this county prosperous long into the future.
Great. Thank you, Al. That's quite comprehensive and very informative. And thank you for the shout outs to LEDA, standing for Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance. We've been around, we will be at our 25th year next year. So we've been at this for a while. So let's switch it over to Patrick for a few minutes. Patrick, once you start talking, people realize that you're not from around here. Can you please tell us about, growing up, where you grew up, and your experiences?
Sure. One of my favorite jokes, and I'm going to tell it here because we've got an audience. So one of my favorite jokes is, you can tell from my accent, I'm not from the Holland area. I'm actually from Grand Haven, which is where I live. But I grew up in the Midlands of England. I lived there till I was about 18 years old. My family lived in a very industrial city, so it was a true melting pot. And it never occurred to me as a child that although we had lots of diversity, it never occurred to me we might have racial tensions. To me, as a young child, it was just a lot of different people. But my mother really brought it home to me one day in one of those stern lectures where she uses my full name. She said, Patrick Graham Moran, and she started picking apart words that I was using. For example, one of the words I used was the Packy shop, which was a shop on the corner. And in my brain, I thought it was called the Packy shop. But what that was actually short for was the Pakistani shop, and it was a slur. And I didn't appreciate that at the time. I had no idea. There was another phrase I used to say when somebody would bring the tea around, because, we're English, we love to drink tea. And when somebody would bring the tea around, we called them the charwalla. And I thought that was just what that person was called. At first, I thought it was that person's name, but it turns out it's literally a slave term, going back to the colonial Indian days where English people had slaves to bring them tea. And if we got tripped out of something, or if I lost something, we used to say, oh, you got gypped out of that. And this was the one that actually brought my mother to sit me down and talk to me about this. I was probably 10 at the time. She said, did you know what that means? And I said, no. She said, you're referring to gypsies. And you're saying that I got cheated out of that like a gypsy cheated me out of it, because, there was a stereotype that gypsies were like that. And she reminded me that our 2 generations back, we were Romani gypsies in my family. Patrick Moran is the name. So it really brought it home to me that my best friend at the time was a Pakistani, who I called Ronnie because I couldn't pronounce his real name. And it all started to flood into my brain that I'm kind of a mean guy. I'm using all of these words. I'm saying all of these things. My mother's pointing her finger at me. And ever since then, I've kind of had this lens on, even though it's not deliberate, even though it's unconscious, that's definitely growing. If I use those words, if I use that language, if I don't watch myself, then I'm growing part of the problem instead of growing part of the solution. And it stuck with me, especially my mother's finger in my face.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. We'll continue with you for another few minutes. So this 21-day challenge, equity challenge, I find that very fascinating. And by the way, thank you so much for bringing it to us. You're heading it up for the state of Michigan, which is interesting because this is like probably one of the least diverse United Ways, and those others are a lot more diverse. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened and then what's going on around the state?
Sure. It really comes down to one of those things of no good deed goes unpunished, right? So I serve as the ALICE chair. So ALICE is our study on asset limited, income constrained but employed individuals. It's the statewide and almost national study now that looks at how do we help families make ends meet? What's going on? And as the state chair for that, we started to see that there were, even inside the ALICE population, issues with equity. So for example, over the last 8 years, the number of white families that have increased in this ALICE population is 1%, but for black families in the same area, it was 10%. So even within inside of a thing that I thought was an inequitable group, there is inequity. So that started to really come to the forefront. And when we got that data, I was sharing it with my state peers. There's a United Way in every county in Michigan and every state in the union. I started to share it with Michigan and say, what are we going to say about this? Because I'm tired of just putting out press releases. And the group challenged me back. This is when no good deed goes unpunished. The group challenged me back and said, well, let's do something more than we're already doing. Because the DEI type of work we do in United Way in Ottawa County is just inside of our programs because we've got such amazing leaders such as yourselves in this area. So we've really never stepped forward in it. Another United Way had already done a 21-day equity challenge. It was open source. So as the state chair for ALICE, they put me in charge of an equity challenge. So I did what all good leaders do, and I formed a committee. And I said, away you go. And they created this. It was open source from another entity. We put it out statewide. It actually started statewide about 8 days ago. Our county finishes tomorrow. We went a little bit early because we wanted to finish for the week of caring. So every county in the state of Michigan has the ability to do this. You can do it on the state level, but we wanted to localize it for Ottawa and Allegan County. So we did that. So we kind of brought all of those data points inside. I say Liz did most of that good work. She changed it for us to be localized to Ottawa, and then we put it back out in this challenge. So we have been ecstatic with the response for the most part.
Great. Thank you so much. And I hear myself. Okay, great. So, Al, back to you.
Yeah.
As you were putting together your DE&I department, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion department, I'd like you to maybe share with us your interface with other county executives, your peers across the state, and maybe even in other parts of the country, and let us know what they thought about it, and are we farther along than most, or in the mid, or behind?
Yeah, so very good question. Actually, farther along than most. We're I think the 11th government in the nation to join GARE, the first this side of the Mississippi and the first in Michigan. And so, Government Alliance for Race and Equity. So, yeah, it's an organization that operates basically to work specifically with local governments, even though I think some state civil rights group departments are joining as well, just to create cohorts across the country that can work on policy and issues together. And so what I found is, so in my assessment of the state, Washtenaw County was the furthest along. They did have a full-time person dedicated, not in a director role, and they didn't have a department. But I think since Ottawa started our office, there's 3 other counties that have started similar offices. And so we really didn't, in Grand Rapids, we looked to Grand Rapids some because they were ahead doing some pretty good work in this area. And across the country, King County, where Seattle is, and Washington, is kind of maybe, I would call them the lead county in the nation. And also the city of Seattle, which is in King County, also has done a lot of good work. So those are some of the areas that we kind of looked at, benchmark on, and really, I think, learned more about how to put together a quality program. In Michigan, I would say we've been a leader in the effort.
Great. I mean, Ottawa County does have the reputation of being a leader in just about every single measurement that you can think of.
Well, thank you.
Except can you share with us which is the area that we are very lagging?
I call Ottawa County as a work in progress, like almost every other organization. So I don't tend to get too hung up on accomplishments. When I see statistics, I know that, I always introduce myself as being from Michigan's finest county. And yet we know we have a lot of work to do in a lot of areas. And we're dedicated to, when I took the baton from Bob Osterbahn, my first day on the job, he said, leave it better for the next administrator. And, we definitely look at our role as standing on the shoulders of those who came before us and wanting to have good shoulders for those who come after us to stand on. But, when I look at weaknesses, housing is one. I mean, it's very difficult for people who are employed at the mid and lower ends of the strata to actually find houses in Ottawa County. And so we're involved with Housing Next. Patrick United Way is heavily involved in that as well. Another weakness in the county right now that we're trying to get our arms around is groundwater. I mean, here we have a county on the state's largest river, the Grand River, and we have Lake Michigan and Spring Lake and Makatawa. It would seem like endless water resources, but at the same time, our groundwater is drying up seriously in parts of the county. And so, that's a weakness for a county that's growing. And so, we have some major strengths. We have areas that we really need to work on improving. And I would say, in the area of DEI, we're on the right track and we're making progress. And we've come a ways and there's a ways to go, and we're dedicated to continuing the work.
Great, thank you. Liz, Robyn, do you have any questions you'd like to ask Al or Patrick?
You're doing such a great job, Gloria. I guess for me, a lot of the reason why I wanted to have other people on the channel, and it just so happens that Rob and I were like, hey, we'll get our boss, so there's so many times where I can say Patrick has voluntold me to do things that I was like, hey, Patrick, guess what? So I'd really like to hear from both of you. Again, the three of us ladies have been talking about this the last couple of weeks, the 21-day equity challenge. The first week for me was kind of difficult and just very eye-opening on a personal level. The second week, last week, was pretty heavy, like institutional racism type stuff. And so I guess I just kind of wanted to know from, both of you, what the 21 days has brought to the forefront for you.
All right. Patrick, you want to go or do you want me to start?
You go right ahead, please.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So I have to admit, I didn't sign up till yesterday, but Robyn's been sending me every day's installment. So I have been reading, I've done my homework every day as far as choosing one of the four and reading. Okay. So I've read very heavily in this area. I've experienced some things, but I think what it reinforced for me is I cannot be as effective an educator as a person of color can be in this case. And the huge benefit for me of the 21-day equity challenge has been the resources, the YouTube channels, the places where people have done such great work to explain the perspective from the people who are living it, instead of the old white guy trying to explain it to people. That I've been sending links to family and friends and colleagues and I think that to me it's the resources have been tremendous, and it's allowed me to I'm great to get on a horse and lead the charge, but sometimes you don't lead from the front. Sometimes you lead from the middle or the back, and that's a good reminder for me that I can probably serve a great role just by connecting people to resources. and letting people that have been impacted tell their story.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, it's interesting because Liz and I poured over the 21 days leading up to it, but never watched every piece of the puzzle all the way through, or never read every piece of the puzzle. It would have taken months. So we trusted a lot of other people to vet that stuff for us. So I was just really shocked almost daily by stuff that I either hadn't thought of that way, or how really effective something was that I knew was an issue but didn't realize it was such a big issue. My wife and I do it quite often at the same time in our living room at night, because we want to share it together, and I don't have time during the day. So she wanted to have all of that a shared experience, and it was really interesting to see her perspective, because I knew mine. I knew that I knew some stuff and didn't know some other stuff, but somebody who has never really done this work with me, it was really interesting to get her perspective on that and how many things people didn't know. She's been running around telling everybody to get on the racial dot map. Like, that just blew her mind, and she said something I'm going to share here. I hope she's watching. I doubt it, because I probably didn't tell her I was going to be on here, but
It's okay, it's recorded.
yeah. One of the things that we talked about was that, in schools, we teach about the end of segregation, right? Like, you learn about the breaking down of the segregation, and then you look at that racial dot map, and it's in square lines. The color dots of who lives where are in square lines. If you didn't know better, you would think it was the rule, right? That we had to be segregated. So it was really interesting to hear her talk about that from her perspective. But I would say that there's no one thing that sticks out, because kind of everything has stuck out to me.
Thank you. Robyn, do you have a question?
I don't know about questions. I guess, and, Al, you've been in the community much longer than I have, right? And Patrick, you've been around too. I think, knowing how many people have joined in on this 21-day equity challenge, and how many people are now, as you said, Patrick, having a shared experience. Do you think that this material is so new to a lot of folks, again, being from where you sit and what you've seen over the years? Or do you think this is material that people are like, you know what, kind of new, but
I would say, and this is just my opinion, but I would say there's probably there's close to 1,000 people in the challenge right now. And I would say that 100 of them could have taught these classes, right? They could have written this stuff. But I thought I was knowledgeable in this world, and I was shocked at what I didn't know. I think people are hearing a lot of stuff for the first time.
Yeah, I do too. In fact, I'll go back to the training that we did with LEDA. We've done a lot of investment in professional development in Ottawa County. We really believe in developing our people. I had more people pull me aside, send me an email, give me a call, and say that that was the most impactful training they had in their entire career. And it's because people don't think about these things. We all kind of get cloistered in our familiar groups. The pace of life is so fast, and there's such little time to truly reflect and to develop new relationships, that many people keep the same sets of the same group around them for many years. And if you don't see it, for some, it's hard to believe it exists. And so I think that's been a true value of this challenge, is capitalizing on recent events in the world, and when people are the most open, I think, to maybe what the heck is going on, and I think that, and so it's been great to meet that questioning and that concern with such a great tool to learn. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people are hearing this for the first time.
And I would say, on a daily basis, people don't tend to wake up and email me what an awesome thing is going on in their life. They don't often call me and say, "Hey, Patrick, nice job on that thing," or "Hey," and I've been getting daily emails from people just saying, "Wow, my eyes have been opened," commentary like that. And we have had a couple of negative comments, which is the point, right? Is to open that dialogue, is to open those eyes. But I'm surprised at how people are willing to actually reach back out and say, hey, can I send this to my friends? Or I missed day 7. It's lost in my email. What, can I have it again?
So thank you. I'm going to actually go to Liz and Robyn to ask the next set of questions, and then I'll ask Al and Patrick the same set of questions because it's more bringing it to a personal level. So Liz, since you're not muted right now, and looking at the summary questions, in what ways have your identities impacted your life, and are there identities of yours that have provided you higher social capital or privilege in certain environments, or vice versa? Is that something you're willing to share with us?
So I think I shared quite a bit, like in our first conversation, where I came from a small town, Fenville, which is not that far from here. And, my mom did not teach the last 3 of us Spanish, so because she didn't want it to be a barrier. And so I, at a very early age, was taught to assimilate to my surroundings. So it has been kind of interesting that Latina identity, I truly didn't have a grasp on. And therefore, because I had my perspective from a white person's perspective, I think there were times where I didn't let things get in the way because I didn't think it was an issue, right? Because I was coming from that perspective and not necessarily the Latina perspective. And when I, going through this challenge, when I look back at things that have occurred, and I think, wow, yeah, that was a time where, because I was a Latina, it was a barrier was bluntly put up. And I didn't really, I think I knew that back then, but I kind of didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to point at it and say, that's what that is. And, so for me, it has really been a great journey, and one that I think that people that have listened have realized I'm becoming very passionate about it. And so I'm hoping that Patrick will allow me to open my wings and fly when it comes to this journey, and see where United Way can work with LEDA and Ottawa County on how we move things forward.
Thank you. Robyn, same question about your identities, and which ways have your identities impacted your life? And I will also answer this for myself as well, so I'm not immune from this.
Yeah, no. So identities, I think, and again, like Liz said, going back to the first day, right, we had to share a little bit about how we identified and the context in which we were growing up in. And I think that, this is going to predate, but in the 70s, right, 70s, 80s, around this era or this area, 2 things that stood out for me was being a female, because that's how I chose to identify, and then, of course, being a woman of color, and not having a lot of role models or individuals that I could either look up to or even be in community with to understand what is the value or what is a potential privilege to be and walk in those two spaces, right? Whether they're independent of each other or when they come together as an intersection. So I think I've had to learn what that is over time. And the interesting dynamic around that is that it did not come at that time from this local area because there wasn't any, right? So, I also have and taught on this concept, right, that, I use the acronym PART, P-A-R-T. Everyone is doing their part or my part. What's my part in this? And it says that everybody has some level of privilege, right? No matter who you are, wherever you are, it's for you to understand and identify what that is, and then deciding how you're going to use it, who you're going to hold yourself accountable to, which is the A part of the part. But it's so important to understand what it means in the context and the frame of our history, because that will obviously change. And even if you agree or don't agree to it, the key is to be able to speak intelligently enough to it to know where you stand on that. So I think part of that, comes back to where I see in my identity and where I need to go.
Great, thank you. I think Al and Patrick, you already shared a little bit, so I will give you just a quick overview of my story. Like Patrick, I am a transplant to this area. I come from Los Angeles, which is just as different and interesting as England is. And I was actually born and grew up in East Los Angeles, which is basically all Latino or Mexican at that point in time. And so where I grew up, everyone looked like me. Everyone was brown. Everyone spoke Spanish. Spanish is my first language. Started speaking English when I started school because my parents were told that if they wanted their children to be successful, or they wanted their children to do well in school, to speak English at home. So since I was the oldest, I retained the most Spanish. But like Liz, there's times when I fumble with what's the word for XYZ in Spanish, and grew up, and I really didn't encounter that many white people or black people until I actually graduated from high school. I ended up going to undergraduate at night and working as an accountant during the day full time with a lot of different people. So that's how I really got to meet people that were very different from me. We talk about the privilege. There's a privilege that you're born with or that your family gives you. And then there's also the privilege that you earn. And I ended up earning a lot of privilege by where I went to business school. And that has allowed me, like Robyn said, you need to determine how you're going to use your privilege. So I use that privilege in order to make certain that different people's voices are heard, and allow for other people's voices to really make an impact. That's one of the reasons why LEDA started these community conversations, is to bring in voices that aren't ordinarily heard. So that is, that was how I decided to start using that. So, and now my iPad went blank, that has my notes on it. So, so this is for all five of us. And Patrick, we'll start with you with the same question. You answered a little bit of this. What were some of your assumptions about race and race inequity before you started this 21-day challenge? Which way have these assumptions been challenged? And in which ways have they been reinforced?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you think you know something, right? Because you kind of work in that kind of field. So Liz and I have been in the field of social services for a long time, and DEI is a part of it and a growing part of it. And I thought I really understood the barriers, right? I thought I worked in them every day to try and solve for these barriers. And to me, the concept of privilege really started to come in, not so much the earned privilege, but the born privilege. So that concept really made me realize that it's almost impossible to escape this position, this environment that you're in, if you don't have that privilege. You've got no options. And that's been reinforced to me many, many times. And I can think back on those things and recognize now, oh, that was me having privilege. I'll give you two examples. One of them is funny and one of them not so much. But when I arrived in America, I went around for a little while, ended up in Spring Lake, and the Spring Lake athletic director at the high school called me and said, would you want to be our new soccer coach? Because I was English. Never asked me if I'd ever played soccer before. Yeah. Never asked me if I was a tennis player. It's just that I had this privilege I had this experience in England, and now they're going to give me this chance and pay me money to be the soccer coach, right? Turns out I was a soccer coach, but anyway, they didn't know that. That was just kind of born privilege. Another thing that came up is I was actually giving a speech in Ottawa County somewhere, and I was talking about the new data from our assessment, the United Way assessment, and I was talking about how difficult it is for people without a lot of resources, but I can replace that with the word privilege, right? Without a lot of resources to get access to healthcare. And I said, for example, my own adult son came back from college, needed to stop going to see his pediatrician because he's 6'4" and 20, and wanted to get a doctor, right? Wanted to get an adult doctor and couldn't find one. And we've got insurance and da. So I was saying, can you imagine how hard it is for people without those resources? I get a call that afternoon from a physician friend that had been in the audience, said, I'll see your son. And I was so excited. And then I realized, who else gets that phone call, right? Who else has that barrier removed for them just because of who they are or what they said? And I didn't think that I had any specific privilege at that point. But the more I read and the more I learn, I recognize my life is absolutely full of privilege, not just because of the color of my skin or the accent I might or might not have, but just systemically and inherently, I have things available to me that others don't. And that just really hit me hard, especially when I took the privilege test in the 21-day challenge, which I can't decide if I did well on it or badly on it, but either way, it said I was highly privileged. And I just had never really, I thought I'd earned it all, right? And it's not true.
Thank you. Al, which way have some of your assumptions of race and race inequity been challenged? And I know that you've done quite a lot of work in this field, so I thought it might be interesting to hear if there were some things that you still had to think about.
Well, there's always more things to think about, but as I said before, I think it was more, the most impactful thing was to hear explanations of things that I had read before, but more from the perspective of people that experience it in a very positive way, very direct, very factual, very positive way, and how that is so much more impactful than how I would say that. And I mean, I think for me, I think that certainly just the role in government and how the world ended up the way it did in the US has been an area where I've done more and more reading. The book, The Color of Law, The New Jim Crow. I mean, there's a lot of books that are very factual, very detailed, that chunk right through, kind of how we got to where we got. And so I think that as I look through the 21 days, that's one of my roles, I think, is to be very frank and honest about government. It's my passion. It's what I've done since I was 22 years old. I've spent 36 years working in local government management. I've taught government at the college level. And so I think that for me, having more and more resources to be able to help people understand where we're at is really kind of the real value that I found from the 21-day challenge.
Thank you. Liz?
So some assumptions. I don't know. Yeah, I can't say that I didn't have any per se, but I just think, again, I go back to this has been kind of an awakening for me as a person of color, and how can I use some of the resources and information to help the community around me, and what can we do? What can I do? What can we do as an organization to shed more light on it? I think the biggest thing for me is I thought I would hear a lot of negativity and feel pushback. And honestly, I haven't felt that at all. I was part of a leadership program that Roger Price does, Leading by Design, and it's the LEAD. It was LEAD 365. Now it's LEAD 24/7. I'm a part of an alum group, and I challenged my alum group to take part in this challenge. And we just met this morning, and they gave me some really good feedback and just some really positive things that they said. And so I think I've been really, really pleasantly surprised to hear how people around us are willing to talk about the subject and listen. I think that's been a really great thing. I think I went in thinking, yeah, it's going to be the same people that we hear talk about it over and over again that are just going to keep talking about it, and other people aren't going to necessarily engage. the way that I'm hoping hoping that people would. And I have been really pleasantly surprised to hear from a lot of white people in my sphere that have reached out and said, this is so great. I love this about this day. I love this about that day. And so that's been really good for me.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Robyn?
Sorry, I just want to make sure we're on the right question. This is about the assumptions.
Yes,
is this number 2?
Yes. So do you have, or what were some of your assumptions about race and racial inequity before we started this challenge? And which ways of...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's, well, everyone has assumptions, right, going into this. I think, I don't know if it's an assumption before, but it's a reinforcement for me, a reminder for me that and I know this intrinsically, but again, just even like hearing Liz, right, like people are on such different journeys, even people of color, and recognizing that there needs to be more space for even our own people of color, right, to be able to continue that journey together and being in communication about where they really are. And the thing is like, why? What were some of those causes for that? So again, I don't know, I guess I assume that, most people of color may already understand the history and get some of these things, but that's not really the case. And so it's just a good reminder.
Thank you. And for me, it's sort of interesting because this gave me a better insight into the white psyche. Because, coming as a Latina woman and being married to a Black man, it's, been sort of inundated with it for many, many years. And hearing some of the stories that, different people have come up with throughout the years, I've really known about that. But it's understanding the white fragility. And it's like, oh, that's why some people get insulted when we talk about this, or why some people don't want to address it. And it's not that I want to be gentle with everyone, but I think that's, to me, what I found really exciting about this whole challenge is the willingness of people to open up and to talk about it and to share their feelings and to try and understand. And then where do we go? Liz, I'll let you ask the question that you wanted to ask at the very end.
Yeah, so I wanted to end with the question for Patrick, and that is, Patrick, so what's next?
I'm sorry, you've used up your allotment of questions for today. We're going to have to move on. The 21-day equity challenge as a United Way opportunity is just a part, and a small part, to be honest, of a journey we were already on. So Gloria, Robyn, Al, United Way, a lot of our other partners, they're on this journey. So we just saw this as an opportunity to really just engage the network. And the next step for us, and this is an answer inside of an answer, right? A question inside of an answer. The next step for us is to get with those experts, those committees, those entities, those groups, and say, here's some data back. We did a pre-survey, we did a post-survey. Here's some of the commentary we got. What is the next step? Internally, we've changed bylaws at United Way to require certain things. Internally, we're adding some things to our funding to make sure that we have an equity lens on it. But what I really want to do is say to the community, how can United Way help in the work that we're already doing to make it even better, even stronger, and even broader than before? We don't want to position ourselves as the experts, because I don't believe we are. In fact, I think I'm on camera right now with the experts. What we want to do is make sure that the network United Way has created, which is enormous, is pushing out the right messages, the right opportunities, and the right ideas.
Great. And Robyn, why don't you ask Al your last question, please?
Al, what's next?
Wow. What's next is, the county early this year began the process of completing a DEI strategic plan, and we're drawing toward the end of that process. And so we've been able to engage a cross-cut of our county functions and some community input, and so we feel pretty good about where that's going. And then one of the other main focuses for us is working with our 24 local units of government. And so I think we'll start to expand some of the work we're doing there. Robyn has completed implicit bias templates with some of the GARE, Government Alliance for Race and Equity materials. And it's really important for us to look at policies, procedures, practices, service delivery, and hold that against a template, to see where is the implicit bias in our operation, and then to work to eliminate that, and to set up a self-diagnostic that we can check in once in a while, to make sure that we're doing our best to keep implicit bias identified and over time, and eliminate it and hopefully prevent that in the future. That's going to be a major thrust of our work. And so I think that those are the two big things on our plate at this time. And of course, along with anything like that goes training. And then also the other thing we've done is our diversity forum. And this year we plan to have a special focus on our local governments along with GARE. And again, we see ourselves as a complementary organization with LEDA. LEDA has done a fantastic job with their annual institute, and they bring in national and internationally renowned speakers, and we're focused on government and our region with a one-day thing where we just try to have people tell the story of what's happening in our region, and then how can we make an impact in governments, because governments have a special role, I think, in the problems and how they've been created, but also governments from the beginning of the U.S. is where problems can be resolved. It's almost like a transformational impact where a lot of input comes in, government makes some of the binding rules that society lives by, and then there's feedback in that process as to how it's going, and that can lead to more input and more change. And so I think that that'll definitely be where we focus most of our effort in the near future.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. If I'm going to finish up, and if you can hang around for just a couple minutes, we'll do a quick chit chat afterwards. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was a privilege and an honor to have these two gentlemen on with us. So this concludes our 3-week United Way 21-day Equity Challenge. In the next month, Hispanic Heritage Month started yesterday. It goes from September 15th to October 15th. So we will have guests to speak about different aspects regarding this. So again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.